Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bill Guertin. I'm Chief Learning Officer of ISBI 360, the first and only all-digital training solution with experts and thought leaders in sports and entertainment. Our special presentation today is entitled Addressing COVID-19 Sales Objections in Sports and Entertainment, and I will be joined today by our special guest expert. He is sales trainer extraordinaire, Brett Zalaski. Brett is founder of Get After It Sales and the solid website and blog Empowerment of a Salesperson, among many other things. He was the very first director of the MLS National Sales Center in Blaine, Minnesota, which was a pioneering move in sales training for the industry. And today, in addition to all his other ventures, he's an expert content provider and faculty member here at ISBI 360 and is leading the charge on a new venture of ours to help teams sell more in a time of depleted staffs and to plug in displaced sales talent into a meaningful, exciting role with the team. We're going to have you a little more on that later. But Brett, welcome. So glad to have you here on this with us.
Always excited to be partnering up, Bill.
It's cool. This will be fun. Well, to start, what I'd like to do is put a few ground rules together. So if you could please be sure to mute your microphones for the courtesy of everyone on the program. If you have any questions, we'd like you to type them in the chat box anytime during the session. And we hope to be able to read those. And Brett is going to be put to work by reading them after he lets everybody in, of course, which is what he's doing right now. To be able to ask a question, we want to have you type in the chat. If you want to get a link to the recording of this session, you're welcome to do so. Please type link and your email into the chat box, and we will go ahead and download that once we're through and get that your way. After the session, if you'd like information on ISBI 360, to type info and your email in the chat box, we will be sure to get to you as well. And if you'd like to schedule a one-on-one meeting to discuss ISBI 360 for your organization, please chat us an email at info@isbi360.com. So I think we'll go ahead and start if that's all right, because indeed we've got a lot to talk about. Brett, when we're discussing different objections and the kinds of objections we're talking about, we've been discussing, you and I, about the difference between direct COVID objections and indirect COVID objections. Would you mind explaining a little bit of what the difference is?
Yeah, if you can monitor the door for a second.
I will do that. Go right ahead.
I'll take over here. So one of the things that I talk a lot in my sales trainings that I think is really, really important is understanding the difference between a direct objection and an indirect objection, period. So traditionally, a direct objection is something like time, money, distance, all those things that are very, very specific. Team performance can be a direct objection time to time. One of the things that's really important, though, is to teach reps to understand indirect objections. And so 3 big indirect objections that we hear people talk about all the time are, for example, getting off a call. People will say, I need to talk to my, or I need to think about it, or, hey, that sounds great. Can you put it in an email? And I think it's really important that we really, truly, genuinely understand what's the difference between a direct objection and an indirect objection. And I'll use team performance as an example. If this person is just genuinely sick of this team losing year after year after year, or as a very direct objection to a player on the team or something happening in that area, that is a direct objection there. If they're saying team performance, but it really is hiding a different objection, that is an indirect objection. And I go back to some of the ones that we discussed. An objection is just a reason that someone isn't buying today. Whatever that reason is, it's someone not purchasing today. And so when I need to talk to my, that's an indirect objection. We treat that as an oh good, but it really truly is an objection because it is a reason why someone's not buying today. And so we need to handle indirect objections similarly to the way that we handle direct objections. We need to uncover what the actual objection is and be able to attack it. So the most important thing here, and I know Bill's going to speak to it, is understanding when we hear from someone an objection they may have to COVID, is making sure that our reps, or teaching our reps, and if we're a sales rep, to make sure that we are drawing the direct lines between, is this a direct objection or is this an indirect objection? Are they using this a Trojan horse for a true, real reason why someone's not buying.
Right. So if you look at that sheet that's on the wall right now that we have that's posted, you'll see that kind of in the COVID world, the direct COVID versus indirect COVIDs, the things about being afraid around large groups of people for fear of contracting the virus, or they're medically compromised, or they're still weak from having COVID themselves, or they've had a family member or a friend that they're nervous about, versus those indirect COVID things that actually are a result, perhaps, of what's happened in our universe here the last 8 or 9 months, but isn't directly tied to the virus. They've lost their job for reasons unknown. Could be COVID, could not be. They have no money, their job is in jeopardy, they don't know what the future will bring. So it's not specific to COVID, but it's indirectly responsible for where they are today. And so what we want to do is talk through some of those answers today, ways in which you should address those, and the kinds of things that we recommend, Brett and myself, that you would use both specific words and overt sorts of ways in which to address those to get further along, because it just seems like we need that sort of thing right now. We need the kinds of words and phrases that will help us get further along. And Brett, I'll let you take it from here, but really the biggest thing that we want to talk about going forward is being able to handle these objections that we have with far more empathy than we have in the past. Brett, I know you're passionate about this. Go ahead and take it from here.
Yeah, so, I think if you've seen my sales training at all, empathy has always been a leader for me whenever I've sold before. I think I've got a new school approach to understanding technology and data and the ways that we can sell, but I also think I'm a very old school person when it comes to the approach and the way that we need to speak to people, to meet people. And I don't think that's ever been more important than it is right now. Every single thing that we do now, we need to lead with empathy, and we need to make sure that we clear the bar to be able to say, if this truly, genuinely is not the right time for you to be able to purchase right now, I understand, and I want to make sure that we can move that out of the way and find a better time for us to connect. I know Bill and I both have had him on our podcast, but Brandon Steiner of Steiner Collectibles had a really good statement to me in the podcast I had with him. We just need to be understanding more than now for us to be able to do the jobs the way that we've done it before. And I'm sure sales reps are going to hate me when they hear this, but we may need to make 10 phone calls where it used to take us 3. We may need to send 5 emails where it took us 2. What we need to do is make sure that that's not a sense of frustration for us, but we are doing it with an empathetic arm and an empathetic reach, and allowing them to be adults and to be able to make decisions for themselves about when they are comfortable being able to purchase right now. And the same comes with objections. When we are handling an objection, we need to show that same type of empathy towards them and continue to let them know that this is truly is not the right time to be able to do this. We want to make sure that we can meet them wherever that opportunity is and whenever a better time is to be able to do that. And then on our end, to be super diligent about finding that person at that time and continuing the conversation. If we're going to hit the numbers we used to reach, it really is going to be with us having to do more work right now, because there are more people, whether they're going to be direct or indirect, there are more people that are going to have objections than there ever have been, as much of a part of the process as objections have always been.
Yeah. And I'll add a little bit more to that, because I think it doesn't mean that you can't sell. It doesn't mean that you can't insist that someone perhaps make a decision, but you have to have more understanding, which requires far more listening. And what it will require are really good questions that allow that person to have you understand them more. Rather than closing, and not to say that you can't close, because we certainly can, and many people have. In fact, some have sold very well when they know what they have to sell. But to have permission for next steps is important in each conversation that you have. To get that permission to reach out to them becomes the close within the close, so that you have that permission, so that they're expecting to hear from you, perhaps even at a time that you and the rep or the prospect can determine makes sense for you, given the circumstances on both sides. And that there not be this hard sell pressure that that many people train and have used for many, many years. It just doesn't make any sense. It's almost tone deaf in today's 2020 vernacular. And so with that, Brett and I are going to go through several of those objections that we have seen from each of you, that Brett and I have both handled directly, but certainly not in this 2020 era, and talk a little bit about how to address those individually. Starting with, I had COVID-19 myself, and I'm still recovering. Certainly there are people in your world that are in that situation. Brett, why don't you start, and then I'll add on my thoughts as to how this ought to be addressed.
Yeah, so I'm getting some feedback from someone.
Joe has some accounts, but he's not calling anybody.
So first thing for me is, this is actually a very specific one for me. My eldest stepson actually had COVID. And so we had to go through the super quarantining. We had to go through all the testing. So this one is very personalized to me. I think the most important aspect to this is first be able to understand where they are in this process. You know, are they someone that still is suffering from issues or problems? Are they someone that are still in the process of being treated for this? Obviously, treatments can be have an incredible range with this topic. And obviously, if this is just a really bad time for someone, having the empathy to be able to set next steps and then be able to walk away, that would be a very direct one. If someone has very real symptoms of this right now, is to be able to show that empathy up front from kind of taking a step back. Now, there's also the opportunity that this still might be an indirect objection in a lot of ways. And so one of the things that I think we should all be doing is basically kind of removing the bar of them purchasing these tickets today. So I think one of the things that we need to do if someone says, you know, I had COVID-19 myself and I'm still recovering, you know, is ask that question that gives you a lot of clarity, which is, you know, if you don't mind my asking, is this something that, you know, truly is taking up a significant part of your life right now and makes this conversation just very difficult to have, or just removing that bar and not saying that you need to purchase today. You know, are you open to having a conversation about potentially when we have the clarity on coming back, what might be some of the things that would fit best for you? You know, I think a lot of people think this and understand this, but for me, one of the things I like to do is continue to take the pressure off, lower the bar, make sure people understand I'm not necessarily asking for the sale right now, or trying to have a larger conversation right now, even though I might. It really is about trying to see if there's a real conversation to be had in this moment.
Yeah, and I'll add on to that, Brett. One of the things that we're seeing and that I have heard from many recovering COVID-19 patients is that people are reticent to talk to them. They almost feel like lepers in a sense, that there's just not this socialization that they've had before they had COVID. It's almost like people either are smothering them or don't want to talk to them at all. And so there's some challenges that they've had just from a mental health perspective. And to have the opportunity to talk to one of us about their favorite sports team may be a genuine release for them and a joy to be able to do so. So even though they say, gosh, I had COVID-19, I'm still recovering, it may not be necessarily an objection, just a conversation point. So don't look at it automatically as a deal breaker or a door closer. I look at it as a door opener. If someone's willing to share that with you, dive in a little more deeply as to how it felt, what sorts of things do. And to Brett's point, if you have some personal situations with your own personal life of someone that's had that, it really is okay to bring that up too, because people do want to talk to others that are human. And so this is something to be able to not hold under a basket, but certainly bring out to the world if you're comfortable doing so.
Yeah, Bill, one more thing I'd add to that real quick, because I think this is important, is, you know, a lot of times, especially for younger salespeople, we see objections as something overtly negative. And so we tend to take a very negative mindset towards those individual objections, like, oh no, they said money, I can't give them money. What am I going to do? Like, oh no, they said they live too far away, I can't make their house close. I think it's important to make sure that when we understand, like, value is the great differentiator when it comes to that. So if they live too far away, it's not that they live too far away, it's that they don't see the value in making that drive. And instead of, to your point, instead of saying, oh no, COVID, the idea is, all right, well, what's the value that I can raise to make this a good conversation for them to be a part of? And how can I make sure that I see this as an opportunity to connect them with a team that they root for versus oh crap, I need to walk away. If they need to walk
I'm
away,
gonna
they'll
go
walk
home.
away. That's
I'll
really
see you
important to
later.
understand. If they don't want to have the conversation, they'll tell you. Don't make that assumption walking in when you hear this or almost anything else that we do along the way.
Yeah, it's almost the same objection here. And I'll put the second one up here on the screen, Brett. I had a family member contract the virus and I'm afraid to do anything. Now, we know this is common with many people who have had to be caregivers and who are now deathly afraid to do anything themselves. But there could be some similar ways to address this. How would you talk to someone about this sort of objection, that they didn't have it themselves, but they are fearful of getting it them because of someone else in their family?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things here. First, similarly, I just want to make sure that they're in a good place to have a good conversation. One of the things I talk about in my sales training, again, is we're in the relentless pursuit of great sales conversations. If there's not a great conversation to be had here, it's much better for us to divorce ourselves from the situation and find a really good follow-up time to be able to talk to them, because they'll actually see us as more of a person and as an ally if we are willing to break away from them in that moment to be able to talk about this. Then I think this touches on an objection I know we're going to cover, is this idea of being around people and being in crowds. I believe that this objection has a very direct line to that objection, in that this really does come down to a family decision about whether or not that family feels comfortable in this moment, first attending a game, and then if they're willing to attend the game, do they have the ability right now to be able to purchase tickets? And so making sure that that's our focus at the front before we start to make that transition down the line is important. If these are people that aren't even thinking about coming out to a professional sports opportunity right now, it's just not a good conversation for us to be in. And as Bill so eloquently wrote on the thing, it's finding that permission to be able to move on to the next step there.
Yeah. And I think that's important as you go, gang. We're all in sales, but really what we are is helping people give us permission to help them move forward. If someone is mentally not ready to move forward, we can continue to talk to them, but to get permission to be in baby steps toward whatever that next phase is for them is important for us to understand. Brett mentioned earlier the empathy thing being so important. And I think it really is the number one thing that reps have to have during this time in our nation's history and the world's history is empathy for where they are today, and allow them to know what the next steps are, but to not pressure them into anything. That really this is something that they need to do on their own time, but given all of the information that they need. Which brings us to the next one, which is this: I'm nervous about being in large groups of people like at your stadium. Brett, you want to take this first? I've got a little more detailed answer to this as we go. So why don't you grab this one first?
You do. I mean, first off, I want to make sure I address something too. I think what's really important right now is to understand that whether or not you're proactively selling and your team is selling inventory or they're selling deposits or maybe not selling anything, I think the opportunity right now is for us to really develop a pipeline. And Bill knows, I've been saying this since March. Whatever day your team decides to go live, that should be like Christmas morning to you as a salesperson or to your sales team or your organization overall. And so our ability to be able to sell right now is critical, because every day that passes is an opportunity cost loss for sure. But we still need to be able to sell in January and February and March. And so the more people we try to run over in this moment or try to overwhelm in this moment, the less people we're going to have access to being able to sell in January and February and March. But as Bill's about to talk about, it doesn't mean you can't do the due diligence to try to make sure you have the right product for the right person whenever that moment comes about. Now, off the soapbox to handle this one, I'm nervous about being in large groups, people like you have inside your stadium. So I think there's a couple things here. If you're open and you have people in the building, it's not just the team's responsibility to show that your organization is safe. It's a sales rep's responsibility to be able to show and demonstrate the measures that they're taking within their organization to have people in the building and have that be a safe environment. And that really isn't just a straightforward one, which is really interesting. I think that's demonstrating a lot of things. So Deanna Witter is a good friend of mine. She works over at the Houston Dynamo. I'm still in the Houston market. And my wife and I were very conflicted about whether or not we wanted to go back to a Dynamo game because we had an opportunity to go. And we didn't feel comfortable until we saw that actually Deanna had brought her family out to one of the games, and the pictures of them in the building did a lot for us to be able to say, if they feel comfortable in this environment, then I know that we can feel comfortable in this environment. So on this one, it really is that ability, more than anything, kind of like overarching on this one, to make sure that you're communicating how your organization, not just vocally, but visually, through video, through picture, how your organization is really supporting this area. Because every data point that we've had, and I do consulting for some teams, I have friends in other organizations, I've had the ability to look at all of the research about coming back to the stadium and in various markets. And the thing that we keep coming back to is, yes, in 6 months, people are willing to come back, but short term, they are far more cautious about walking back in the stadium to be surrounded by big crowds. And so our ability to pre-handle this objection, not just vocally, but through pictures and video, I believe is critical for our organization, but I also think it's critical for every sales rep individually to be able to make sure that we are taking this off the table almost before the conversation starts. The second part about this, though, is when we actually get this in the moment, and again, I know we sound like a broken record here, is to have empathy in the moment for that. I have kids, so I can create a level of empathy saying, I'm nervous around having my kids and myself and my wife in these situations as well, or however you want to connect with this too, and talking about this, having empathy to be able to address this directly. But I also think it's really critical, one more time, to make sure we're identifying if this is a direct objection, which if it is, we can't necessarily solve that right now. And what we're going to do if we see this as a direct objection or uncover it as a direct objection, we may have a tendency to actually argue with the buyer in this instance. No, we're safe. No, things are good. No, I promise you we're fine. No, I promise you we're doing all the right protocols. Arguing isn't selling. It's the opposite of selling. It's actually driving people further away from a conversation. If they are genuinely uncomfortable being around crowds, it doesn't matter if you've got 50 people in the building or 50,000 people in the building. They're not going to be comfortable no matter what the size of the crowd is. They know you, they know your stadium, they know your team, they know what a crowd looks like to them. And so arguing in that moment is just, it's not going to work out for you if that's a direct objection in that moment. So my question here to anybody that brings this up first is saying, are you nervous about being in large groups, period, regardless of the protocols the team or the organization is going through to ensure the safety that we have? Or, are you comfortable coming back, but making sure that you want to understand the measures we're going through to be able to support you first? And if it's the second one, then obviously that's an indirect one. They just want to know that they're going to be safe when they walk in, which, by the way, is an incredibly fair thing for them to want to do. And it's incredibly fair that they haven't read the protocols on our website yet. I've literally heard reps on the phone get upset that one of our fans hasn't read through the protocols that we've instituted yet. It's not their job to digest that information. It's our job to be able to communicate that information. So asking that question from a clarity standpoint, removing it and understanding if it's direct or indirect, direct having empathy, and then indirect, making sure that we remove that and then finding where the opportunity exists there if there's another objection or there's more questions to be able to ask.
Yeah, Brett, I couldn't agree more with this, that we have it on the website. They ought to be able to read it. All of us on the call, if you've been in sports at all, have experienced the joy of having to talk to someone on the phone that's staring at their own computer, asking the question, should I hit the button buy now? Will that help me buy the tickets? And you've all been in that moment of frustration that people should know this, but they don't. They need you. And it just underscores the fact that your value is probably more apropos to the team than ever, to help people have a human being that they can talk to about where things stand with regard to COVID and regard to where the team's performance is or where you stand in terms of what's next for them. So I want to talk a little bit about giving people information that they don't have. If you've heard anything about the best practices of what companies and individuals have appreciated about other companies that have done really well in COVID, you hear that all HR departments will tell you communication is key. You got to over communicate almost to people. And so if someone says, I'm still nervous about being in crowds, this is a conversation you can have, because what they're really craving in this case is more communication. And there's a 4-step system that I would like to share with you today that you could actually bring to life in your own sales world. If you start with empathy, which we've talked about from the very beginning today, that becomes the first element. And I'm going to give examples of each one of these so you can kind of see how it flows. The second part is to outline what you know. Talk about those elements that are for sure, that do have merit, that you can absolutely say this is a fact. Third is to give details about potential solutions. So talk about what other teams are considering and what elements are in the mix, not necessarily what you're going to do, but what's being discussed in the world of sports and entertainment. And then a fourth thing is to close on the follow-up, is that close not necessarily on the deal, but on when you can then talk to them next, when there'll be more clarity that the two of you can discuss. So let's actually start this from the beginning. If we were to do this and someone says, boy, I'm just still very, very nervous about being in a crowd, we might say, well, gosh, I understand your concern. We want you back as soon as possible, but we won't open the gates until we feel we have a plan in place that makes it safe enough for you, your family, and for us. We have to work safely there too. If you're not using that element, that, gosh, we have to be able to work safely there too, you should probably put that in your dialogue, because it really resonates well with people. The next part is to outline the realities that you know. So let's talk about the stuff that you know. Here's what we might say. With the social distancing guidelines, we're only allowed to use a small percentage of our seats at any one time. We're also working on installing new touchless equipment and new safety protocols to keep you safe when you're here. You've probably read or heard about that, right? So you want to get a confirmation that they've actually seen a little bit about this. There are a few different mathematical systems that others are using, and we're still going through those to figure out which one is the safest for our situation. Notice I said safest, not best. Always, we become a safety and health, we're a health and wellness company now, gang. Every business that is moving forward right now has to consider themselves a health and wellness company first and foremost. And so as you dialogue this out and you write it out the way you're going to say it, please keep that in mind as you go. People need to hear that from you. All of this depends on our local health officials and our local governments and what they'll allow us to do. So most of the time they're going to err on, they're going to err on the side of caution too. So everybody's trying to be as safe as possible during this thing. One of the solutions is to map out clusters of 2, 4, or 6 seats like a checkerboard and only sell those seats. Now, for most places, that would only allow about 20 to 25% of capacity. The downside is that if you were want to buy seats in that location, you may have to buy all the seats we have clustered there. So if you only had 3 people, you'd have to buy all 4 seats. It's not perfect, but it's an option. Another option uses a computer algorithm to block out the seats we sell as soon as we sell them and automatically blocks out the socially distanced seats around them. It gives us a few more seats to sell, but it's difficult to do mathematically and it may create more problems than it solves. We would not do that unless we knew that it would keep you safe. Everybody seeing the emphasis here? It's not about making more money, it's about keeping people safe. We can also use our historical data, figure out what percentage of people came and what size groups, and just map out the whole stadium using those averages. All of this is dependent on what the health officials say, and everyone will have to follow a new set of guidelines while they're here. And that's just talking about the seating questions. We have to plan for all the other considerations like the parking lot, the payment systems we use, the entry gates, the security checks, the concessions, merchandise, the constant cleaning of the handrails and the restrooms and the common areas, and making sure everybody's following those guidelines. It's a huge undertaking, but we won't open up unless we're as sure as we can be that it is as safe as possible for fans like you. Now, gang, you might not take that time to go through all of that, but do you see where I'm headed here? If somebody's deathly afraid to go out into crowds, what they need to hear from us is information, maybe not specific about the organization that you represent, but what are the options? What's going on to help me feel better about going back into crowds? So let's go into just the fourth portion, and that's to close on the follow-up. When we have a workable plan and we figured out all the details, may I reach out to you with some ticket options? So here's the close on that follow-up. And if you're so doggedly persistent, you might add one more thing, just like Columbo, right? Oh, just one more thing. Let's pretend we had all the pieces figured out. Where do you think you'd want to sit? Where have you had your best experience in the stadium as far as seat locations? And so here you might talk in terms of pictures about what people have enjoyed in the past, and then you can begin to discuss what it might be coming up here in the near future. Make sense? Brett, how would you comment on that?
It's awesome. I hope everyone wrote down the 4-point plan on all of those things. There's really two things that one thing I want to reinforce, and one thing that I really want to add right now. From a reinforcement standpoint, it's just so critical right now that we make sure that we just meet people in the moment, and we create good follow-up plans with the people when they're able to be followed up on. There's going to be different moments for different people when they're going to be willing to purchase and when they're going to be willing to buy. And we're going to miss out on a very real opportunity if we don't do a good job in making sure that we follow up with them. Utilize your CRM, utilize your calendar, make sure you are doing everything you can to follow up with these people, because if you've been this kind to them in the moment, they are going to be kind enough to give you the time in the future to communicate with them in the right way. And whether or not that actually happens, you need to believe that, because being a good human right now has never been more important from a sales standpoint. That said, and I think this is critical, reps are going to tend to stay away from urgency right now. And I think that is a fundamental mistake. Today is always the best day to buy. It is always the day that we have the best seat locations. It is always the day that is the least expensive for the buyer. It is always the day they have the most amount of time to be able to plan to come out to the games. And that doesn't change at all just because the circumstances are a little bit different. And when we've cleared the hurdles, especially the indirect hurdles, and we've gained access to that conversation, we still have every bit the permission to make sure we're creating urgency in the moment about why today is the right day to buy. If you've done all the work to clear all the bars that Bill and I have been discussing, especially with that 4-point plan Bill has, then you are doing yourself and you are doing the client a complete disservice when you don't allow them to jump over the bar. And the point I keep making in almost every conversation I'm having, I'm sure Bill's sick of hearing this, I always go back to, if anybody's seen the movie Starsky and Hutch with Owen Wilson and Ben Stiller, Snoop Dogg plays Huggy Bear, and he says, I'll lay it out so y'all can play it out. And I think that's our responsibility. Once we've cleared the bar, once we've had a good conversation with them, we create urgency to let them know why they should buy that product today, the thing we recommend. Then we need to let them and allow them to be able to make a decision. But when we choose not to overcome those objections, or we choose not to be urgent in the moment, we are actually taking the purchasing decision away from them, and we are actually making the decision for them. And I think there's stories now of teams in Major League Baseball that are having real sales success. There are stories of teams in Major League Soccer having real sales success that I've heard right now. That can be us. We just need to give our fans permission and opportunity to say yes right now, especially when we do a lot of the hard work.
Absolutely. Hard sell does not have to equal urgency. And indeed, you can sell without closing hard on that. And I think that's what Brett is really saying here. There's a difference between that. And we hope that you've seen a little bit of that here. We wish to answer all of your questions. And Brett, I'm going to put you to task, if you wouldn't mind, as I go through this next section, to take a look at those questions and see which ones you'd like to answer from that. We'd like to answer as many of them as we can, or all of them. So if you wouldn't mind taking a look at that chat, if you're equipped to do that, I'd like to take a little bit of time to discuss with the group who may not be aware of what it is that we do at ISBI 360. We are the virtual training network, essentially, that is involved in micro-learning, habit-forming training that is annualized, not just 2 or 3 days at a time, 8 hours a day. What we've done is create a system that allows people to learn with 10 to 15 minutes at a time. What we're finding is that micro-learning applied properly allows for better concentration, for better focus, for better application, and for 80% better retention. We have programs in ticket sales, customer service, in sponsorship, in social media, 3 levels of ticket sales, and in leadership. And we've been pleased to be a part of many teams, in fact, many people here that are on the call today that have done that, including the Chicago Fire, who employed us as soon as things got weird with COVID. And what they found is that this was an excellent way to keep their people focused and gainfully moving forward in their careers. One of the most frustrating parts of this has been just sitting around at home waiting for something to do. What we've been able to do with Mike and many of his staff is to be able to keep them focused and actively engaged. Which brings us to the second part, and this was a couple of months ago, where we at ISBI, of course, have been somewhat stalled as well with the work that we have done. And we looked at each other and we said, gosh, there's a whole lot of people that are out there. And I really have to credit Brett with a lot of the foresight with this, and with many of the people that we have trained ourselves and many friends that you know, in fact, even some of you here on the call, you have been let go for no reason of your own, and you are wanting to sell. And we've felt very badly about that. In fact, have created a company to be able to address this. It's called the ISBI Virtual Sales Network. We now know through several months of being forced into it that the virtual universe is now accepted and a remote workforce can work, especially given the tools that are now available to us remotely. And so we know how much of a significant talent workforce is out there. And so we have essentially created a rent-a-rep model to be able to help a team ramp up when they don't have the sales personnel, they don't have the money to hire them, but they have a product to sell and they need to sell it quickly. You can supplement with these reps, or you can replace what you have because of costs, perhaps, at a significantly reduced rate. And I'm not saying that you should replace all the current reps with that, but if the situation is such that ownership has mandated certain things to happen and you still have to sell things, we have given people an alternative to be able to do that and eliminate many of the substantial incremental costs that a traditional in-house staff would incur. In fact, we're able to do this on average for about 40% less versus a traditional cost of sales. Not only can you rent these reps, if you will, for a certain period of time, you don't have to stick with them. You can be 90 days and be done. But here's the exciting part. You can actually listen to these reps do their thing, given the kinds of resources that we're going to have, and you can see what they're doing online. The resources that we're investing in, Microsoft Dynamics for each individual rep, Dial Source for each individual rep, so that you can actually dial in and listen to their calls, that you can hire these individuals that you have rented full time if you like the work that they do. In fact, many of the people that we have recruited for this sales staff or this force want to have that exposure. They want to be able to get involved and to be seen by a team as somebody who is willing to be a part of their department and make a meaningful contribution to their ongoing success. And so we have found a way in which to marry these two groups, this group that has been set aside just because of the economics of such, and teams that literally have to have a sales force right now, but have no way in which to hire them full time. Brett, what would you add to that?
Yeah, 2 things. First off, one of my favorite things about the reps that are involved in the program, and some of them are actually on this today. It was part of their homework assignment, so a decent amount of them are here and participating. These are people that are choosing to do a couple of things during this trying time. They're choosing to get trained. So these people have experience from all over. We have people that have come to us from just about every professional league you could possibly imagine. And instead of saying, you know what, I'm really good at my job, I'll be fine, they've said, you know, not only do I want to go sell for a team, but I'm willing to be trained up. I want to learn. I want to get better. And they've made that decision to be able to do that. And they're writing the story for themselves about the quality of rep they're going to be when this all goes by. And to me, that's my favorite part about working with them. Every single one of them cares about selling, but they care about training and getting better more, which is such a cool environment to be in on a day in and day out basis. And the second is, no matter what, COVID or no COVID, I just believe there's a fundamental gap in the industry between what a team does from an onboarding, training, coaching, soft cost standpoint. We did a study, myself and another person who's a part of this who worked for an NBA team. We both found that the cost of a bad rep to an organization is $125,000, and that was me with an MLS team and that person with an NBA team. And that's an expensive cost to an organization all in. for someone that you pay $24,000 a year in salary, 25 a year in salary too. And so for us, filling that gap between what a team has to do and everything they have to do, and then what an Elevator, an IMG Learfield, or an Aspire, or Legends, who are incredible at what they do, instead of having to go into a full strategic partnership with them. You know, we're a blunt force instrument just to be able to move new business as a part of your current strategy within an organization. And I couldn't be surrounded by better sales reps to do it, and better people like Bill. And it's a compliment to the structure and what they've created with ISBI that we're able to do this really seamlessly through the platform from a training standpoint and overall. And this is, having started the National Sales Center, the DNA of that runs through everything we're doing. But this has been individually my favorite job I've had since the National Sales Center, which is really cool.
We'd love to talk to you individually about the opportunity that exists both in ISBI 360 on the training side and on the virtual sales network of ISBI. And you're welcome to book a meeting with us at the website that we have there, or the email that we have there. But let's go ahead and get into the questions, Brett. I tasked you to look at those, and I hope that you have. What have we got in the chat?
We've got a few. The first one from Jacob: would you recommend telling companies who typically bring all their employees or clients to one outing, or to try to break it up into several smaller outings?
Well, it's fascinating what's happening now, because the very nature of group sales is that everybody should get together and get to know each other. And because of what's happened, that very fabric is being torn apart, because they're telling you don't be a part. I would absolutely suggest that you be in smaller groups. I would also suggest that things happen in addition to the game, prior to the game, and even after the game itself, that you can tie in. You can have some fun trivia games that people could win prizes for that home team that they could wear at the game itself, that could be done online or previous to that game itself. There's all kinds of creative ways in which to break this up into smaller segments, depending on what you're allowed to do from your own jurisdiction. But my short answer is absolutely look into what your jurisdiction, your state, your local governments will allow, and break it down to that, and suggest really creative ways in which the organizations you work with can work under those restrictions.
I mean, listen, I think we could do I think I saw Denise from Spinzo in here. I'm sure we could do like a 46-hour conversation surrounding what we're going to do with group sales in 2021. I think that would be a whole individual topic unto itself. The thing I would say is, the one thing this can't do is stop you from having conversations, like I've said the entire time. At this point, you need to continue to have those conversations with everyone and allow each of your groups to make that decision independently, but make sure that you're having them make that decision. You're bringing these options to people, and whatever options you will have available, whatever modified options you have available, whatever pre-game or post-game options you'll have available. But you need to make sure that during this time you stay in steady contact within. One, because some of the way that they go about it might change. So they might make different decisions at different times. But overall, you're going to need these people when everything comes back to normal. So if all you're doing is just stop calling them because they're not making this decision, you're shooting yourself in the foot in a really severe way. You know, this is actually one of the things that churches are going through, similar to sports right now, is they know about a third of their fans aren't going to come back because the cycle has broken, meaning that the consistency with which they went has been broken. So they're going to stop that repeatable behavior. If we don't keep putting that repeatable behavior in front of fans, even if they don't go, we are going to see a lot of people who walk away forever if we are not consistent in the way that we dialogue with them, even if they make the decision that 2021 isn't the year.
It's a great point, Brett. And I would also go even one deeper than that, that there is a reason why that group, whoever it is that you're going to break up, has come out to a game. To know that fundamental reason why they came is critical more now than ever. And that may have very well changed from the time they were there last. And so the reason they got together in 2019 could be very, very different than the reason they all want to get together in 2021. Go back to your roots and find out why they took a group outing on in the first place. Ask them what's changed in their organization, what their new goals are, and then create a plan that may or may not include smaller groups, but includes you nonetheless in fulfilling that new set of goals and objectives that they now have. It's sales 101, but it really has to be followed now, I believe, more than ever.
There could even be some dark day or non-game day opportunities that will allow them to cut another check this year, even though it might not be as big. They still cut a check. They're still in the habit of doing that every year by you creating this different opportunity for them. Again, it may not be a game because that might not fit their needs, but there might be other opportunities that we have that we can present. And we're just going to need to be creative about that. Next question.
I want to be sure. Let's see if we can answer as many questions as possible. What's the next one that you have up?
Next question from Kyle. How would you overcome this objection? I'm interested in buying, but I don't want to attend a game that is 20% capacity.
Oh, okay. So I would ask a little deeper about why there's an objection to seeing a game at 20%. It may be because it doesn't feel like a real game because I don't have the other 80% of the people there around me that I can high five. Are they concerned about the virus? Are they concerned about the way in which their clients will react if they invite them? So I would want to probe a little more deeply about that. And if it's really something that's unovercomable, I don't want to get into a fight with someone about that. I would just to say, when we get to a point where we're over 20%, let's go ahead and talk again when it makes more sense. So it's never a no, it's just a not yet. And so if there's a way in which we can get around it, certainly we will. But I want to dig a little more deeply into the root cause of that reason they don't want to come at 20%.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've tackled that on the positive way where it's like, that's too many people. But I think one of the things that we need to be conscious of is this idea that the environment that's occurring inside the stadiums is not what it is. Actually, there's a lot of soccer teams right now across the world that when they opened their capacities, filled it, and then they've actually seen decreased attendance every game because the environment is very similar to that sport. And I think just having the empathy actually in the opposite direction too, and setting up those timelines in the opposite direction there too is really important. Richard, with the NBA releasing official December 22nd start date and AHL probably close to releasing their start date, but without any idea when fans will be allowed in arenas, how do you merge that good schedule news with the uncertainty of no fans timeline, which will vary by team, venue, city, when talking to prospects?
You want to take that first or shall I?
Go for it.
Well, I think it is exciting to let people know what's happening, but I think you still have to go back to when they wanted to discuss it. If you don't know what that capacity is, you cannot, in my opinion, you can't oversell just yet because you're not sure where that is. You certainly want to capitalize on the good news. And I might send out some sort of communication with everyone saying, hey, have you heard? That's great. And then just as we have throughout this entire process, caught up with them and saying, if we were to be able to open up, where would you like to be? And line up those prospects for when you know definitively when you can have people in stands. Now, there are many teams that are selling out no matter what, and they're going to figure it out in the mix after they're done. I think that's a little challenging for the people who will have to unravel it in customer service once they figure out how many they really do have to sell. But I would just get excited with folks and let them know what their number 1, 2, and 3 options are in a conversation so that it could be an easier conversation once you really have the data you need to sell them.
I think establishing a clear timeline, agreed, is super important with them. When's the right opportunity to follow up? I would say too, if your team makes a decision to sell, don't be the last person to do that either because of some of your concerns about the lack of information. I think if we've learned one thing about our fans this off season is that our fans are incredible. Like we're hearing renewal rates going into this year off the charts because essentially every fan rolled over a lot of their stuff as opposed to asking for refunds. We're talking the vast majority of situations I've seen have seen fans be willing to roll over. And so if your team has made the decision to sell, whether inside or outside, again, don't be making that decision for your fans. Make sure that you lay out all the data that you have and feel confident that your team's going to do right by the fans no matter what. Your team's going to allow the refund. Your team's going to roll over. Your team is never going to let that money go completely wasted by the organization. And so sell with that level of confidence as you go in.
Can I just say one thing too, and then we'll go to the next question?
Yeah.
If they're angry, they're not angry at you.
Not you.
All right. I know that you probably know that already, and maybe you just needed somebody to tell you that, because after a while, the weight of the world becomes a little bit difficult from a reps and a service reps perspective. The whole situation is weighing on their shoulders, not just your situation, but their family situation, their work situation, everything that's going on right now is multiplying. And if somebody lashes out at you, it isn't because of anything you did specifically. It's probably just the cumulative nature of all that's happening in their lives at one time. Be careful not to let it get the best of you.
100%. In building a pipeline, Marco asked, in building a pipeline, what are clues as to whether a prospect is worth continuing to spend time conversing, contacting, pursuing down the line when we have more limited time, closer to or during the season?
Why don't you grab that one first, Brad? You like this. You talk about this a lot.
All the time. We literally were just talking about it this morning in our training for the Virtual Sales Network on time management and lead qualification. So you're hitting me on a hot topic right now for me personally. There's a couple rules that I have on this one. First off, when getting off the conversation with them, we need to qualify them. I need to talk to my whoever. I need to think about it. I need to, can you put that in an email? We need to be qualifying these people down to what their actual objection is, or how serious or how vague they are in the way they describe it, as to whether or not they're worth continuing to pursue down the line. Now, there's going to be some people who bring up COVID right away, and then you're immediately getting out of the conversation. And I would say all of those people are willing to be followed up with. A rule of thumb of mine in general is, as you continue to keep chasing someone, if you see their name and you like that person's name, it's like, oh, Bill, I know if I just catch them, I'm going to have a really good conversation with Bill. If that's where your mentality is at, continue to go after Bill, make him a part of the chase that you're doing. But at some point, and I know everyone here is going to do the head nod, at some point we go, Bill, pick up the phone, man. And in that moment, that mentality and that mind shift changes, we need to have serious consideration towards breaking up with them and giving them more real separation across the way. It really is that defining moment that we've learned from all of our personal relationships, all of our sales relationships, that let us know that that person is genuinely not wanting to speak with us. And when that moment comes, we cannot hit those people over the head. Otherwise, we will never have the opportunity or the permission to be able to sell to those people. And I think that's an important point of differentiation. There's those people that'll just jump right out of the bat and say COVID. There's going to be those people that say it more towards the end of the conversation right off the bat. Call them again. At the end, qualify where that lead is at right now in their own head. As it starts progressing over time, just have that rule of thumb in mind, and be willing to break up with people and get away from people. We are in the relentless pursuit of great sales conversations, and those aren't great sales conversations when they start ghosting you.
Yeah, I really couldn't add much to that, Brett, only to say that as you get in this business and you get involved in it long enough, you almost have a gut feel as to whether or not this is somebody worth pursuing. And it's only over time that you really learn the nuances that you've heard from others. And you shouldn't always go with them 100%, but I think gut feel becomes far more important as you get better and better at this, because you can, draw on the experiences that you've had. So if you're brand new at this and answering that question, in time, you will be better at being able to winnow away the chaff and get to the good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll get to Bill Dorsey's question in a minute because it's a little bit off topic, but it's always worth addressing, especially with some leaders in the group. Michael asked, one of the main benefits in becoming a seasoned member being off-season events. What is the best route to make these still seem valid, even though most are likely not something that will happen in the current climate?
Oh, you mean like conferences and trade shows and such?
No, he's talking about season ticket member benefits that include some like off-season events.
I'm sorry, I missed. Let me go ahead and read that. And if you want to answer that while I read it, that would be great. I want to be sure and get it right.
So I think there's a few things here. Like, I'll go really macro on this one. I think this is a perfect time for teams to evaluate their benefits, period. This is one of my favorite stories that I tell. A while back when I worked for the Columbus Crew, we had this like poker night that we had that cost our organization 6 figures, which for an MLS team to throw a party like that, that's a big expense on our behalf. To go out and do that, even with the partnerships that we had in the community, it still cost us that much money. When we actually did the underlying research on it, we actually found that event, it was all the same fans who are already going to renew anyway, no matter what we did. So I think this is a really important time and an important moment for every team to look at the benefits that they're offering and making sure that those benefits have real value. What we did at the Crew is we actually took that money and reinvested it into our rookie boot camp, and we reinvested it into some of the ways that we onboarded season ticket holders and influenced those first year and second year season ticket holders. And that money allocated there, even though it wasn't as sexy as this cool poker night where you got to roll craps next to a player, it actually had a much bigger long-term impact on our organization. And so I do think this is a moment that even if those go away, we need to evaluate. What I would say as a team and an organization, first is find ways to use the virtual world to connect your coaches, your front office, your senior management with the people in the organizations. If you are a rep, and this is going to sound really harsh, Bill, so please feel free to moderate if you do. If you are a rep and you are selling based on off-season events, you're selling the wrong thing. That is the most expensive ticket in your marketplace if someone is buying because of the events that happen. Your benefits are objection handlers. They need to be buying the seat. Nobody's buying a season ticket because of the scarf or the jersey or the event. If they are, that is the most expensive scarf, jersey, or event that's occurring. If that's the problem you're consistently running into, then you need to take a step back on your own sales process and make sure that you're doing the right job evaluating along the way to make sure they are bought into the seats and the product and the inventory and the recommendation that you make.
Yeah, no, I won't beat you up for that, Brad. It's a shaky sale if that's what it's built on. And so, you know, that's a challenge, I would say. You as reps, however, have a little bit more control over your own destiny than you might think. I might suggest that you as a rep, those individual reps who are on the call right now, your list could be your own mini chamber of commerce. And I want you to think about this for a moment. The people that you represent, the people that have been around for a while, and I'm looking at Bill Junker right now just because he's been around forever. And he has a list at the Milwaukee Brewers that is gold. People love Bill. They hang out with him. They know him. They see him in the stands, and they know him by face. They know him. They know all of his life story and everything there. Could Bill or you not put together a Zoom Chamber of Commerce event once a month, bringing in some sort of special guest, either from the team or otherwise, that others that are your customers, this is the Bill Junker Chamber of Commerce, that you could get together to talk about something beyond the sporting world, but something of interest to a majority of people that you might have. And it could be something as off base as, you know, woodworking or, you know, model airplane building or something else, or maybe the president of the bank or something else talking about how finances have changed in this time. Things that would be of interest to your group. In fact, you might even find that one or two of your season ticket members would be great as speakers at a Chamber of Commerce event like that. So you become infinitely valuable, not just because they're season ticket holders with the team, but because they're season ticket holders of the team with you. Think about how you might be able to take that. And I recognize that maybe some of the stuff that we've sold in the off season isn't going to happen, but what can you add individually right now during this time that could add even greater value than what people bought into in the first place?
Yeah, no doubt. The last question we've got so far is Bill Dorsey. Do you believe that people graduating with sports marketing degrees are as valuable as others you may bring in? How valuable do you think sports marketing graduates are as sales agents?
Boy, that's as varied as the type of people that they are individually. I think I don't know that it matters necessarily what the program is or where they've come from. I happen to think that empathy and work ethic and desire to succeed all factor into that. And so I think sports marketing degrees still have value, but I don't think they have any more or less value than someone else that may have a different viewpoint. Sean Ream, for example, we were just talking to Sean a couple of weeks ago in your training, Brett, who has a wild background. In fact, he was the director of ticket sales for like the National Criminal History Museum in Pittsburgh or something. I mean, just some weird thing. But what it's given him is a holistic viewpoint of what the world is like. And so I think he has seen that there's value in knowing how the rest of the world works. And so, Bill, to answer your question, I think the degree is valuable. I don't think it's perhaps end all be all, that you should just hire people that have sports marketing degrees. I think that anyone that's hiring today should look holistically at the person who's applying and find out what they're going to bring to your organization from a work ethic perspective and from a coachability perspective, and several other elements that we could probably spend another hour talking about.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think two things to that real quick. Obviously, like if I see a UMass sports management or I see a Baylor sports management, there's a tendency to give those a little bit more credibility because I know the programs that go behind those. So I tend to take a couple seconds and give them the benefit of the doubt more than I might give other ones. And along the way, like, for example, like Loras College in Iowa has produced some really good salespeople and has a good sports management program now. And so there's some of these that you start to get preferences along the way. And I think that is fine as part of the diligence you take as you go through something. It was really neat. So I was, and I think this is more important than ever, even in the digital age. I went to the SMAs a couple of years ago when it was in Dallas. And one of the things that they discussed was all the research shows that the longer that you actually spend with someone in the recruiting process, the better that hire ends up becoming. And Bill knows this. I actually stole this quite a bit from Brian Pfeiffer, who was my old boss at the National Sales Center. It wasn't about the individual conversations we had with them. Anybody can look good over 30 minutes. It was having multiple interviews with them over a longer period of time, looking at their follow-up, having them do conversations with not just myself, but with Brian and with other people at MLS to make sure that we saw how they interacted with other people. I was a huge believer, and I took over for Bill when he started this at the Columbus Crew with Clark Beacom. But I'm one of the people that really was started and made popular the networking and training events that go in here and evaluating those reps every step along the way. I just don't think, and again, it's not necessarily what's on the resume. It's not necessarily, no offense, what's on the background check. For me, it's way more the person that you get to know along the experience. And I just don't believe you can get to know someone in one 30-second conversation, whether that's virtual, digital, or anything else, and looking at their resume. One of the things that I've found out during this time interviewing people to come in the program, and this is a very light interview process to get into this program right now because it's really friends and family. One of the things that's really turned me off is being like, all right, we're going to do these 2 weeks of training. We're going to do these 4 weeks of training, and watching people say, no, when you guys sell for a team, just let me know. I'll do that, but I don't feel like I need to do the training. For me, that's an immediate out. If you're not willing to put in the work, I don't believe that you're going to make me look good in that specific instance, in that situation. So finding ways to be able to vet that during this time is going to be critical. And if you've lost reps at some point, maybe it's not all the way to where you are. You're going to staff up again at some point. And I think being very diligent and not just looking at a resume, just because this person sold at this one place with this attitude, that could have been really built up for them. There's some instances in organizations that they just don't have to sell. And I tell everybody, I am a better salesperson because I sold indoor lacrosse in Boston, and I'm a better salesperson because I sold women's professional soccer in Washington, D.C. It's easy to look at my resume and get caught up with, oh, he worked for Teambo at the NBA. Oh, he started the National Sales Center. Oh, he worked with the Columbus Crew. He worked with the Houston Dynamo. For me, where I learned the most and why I'm a better salesperson more than anything else was the experiences that I had in the toughest environments that I was in to be able to sell. And I guarantee that if I walked into an interview and it said Boston Blazers and Washington Freedom, and you saw someone else that was from one of the Big Five leagues, you'd look at them, but I would spend this time doing the due diligence to vet those people on the opposite side, because those are people that have really sold and really grinded.
You bet. We kind of got off the actual subject, which is answering the COVID-19 objection. So what I'd like to do is to have everyone type in the chat, if you would, the one nugget that you took away today that you'll be able to apply in the world that you are in right now. And so if you'll go ahead and type that in, I'll describe some of the things that we'd like to ask you to do. For one-on-one discussions with me about the training network, there is a way in which you can schedule a one-on-one meeting with me, and it's right there on the screen. For one-on-one discussions with Brett about the virtual sales network, which we're not only from a team perspective, but also if you are a rep that is interested in looking into this for yourself, please get a hold of Brett at ISBI360.com. We'd love to have you join our LinkedIn discussion group, which is great. Or if you'd like to request a recording of this session, please put whatever that, just put the word link and your email in the chat box, and we will absolutely get to every single person that's there. Well, on behalf of Brett and myself, I just want to say thank you, everybody. We've really appreciated being a part of this. I hope you've learned a lot from this, and I hope that you'll continue to keep the faith. It is not easy, but all of us together can make this work. And I know that if there's any help we can provide each of you, whether individually or collectively as a team, we'd love to do that. Brett, any parting words before we wrap up here?
Just thanks for everyone for spending the time here. There's a million other places to be and talk about, but obviously this is a really critical topic in this moment, and I believe this is the right place to spend time. And I want to make sure that we understand that regardless of where we are at general right now, the news about the vaccine the other day was really great news for this industry, and it's an amazing step forward for us to get some level of return to normalcy along the way, but it's not going to stop these objections from happening as we move forward. But I hope it gave everyone a lot of excitement and a lot of accountability towards really being ready to go in sooner than later whenever your team decides to move forward to sell.
Thank you all for your time today. We appreciate it. Please put your info in the chat. We'll be open for another few minutes here to allow you to do that. And in fact, you can talk it up with each of the people that are there if you'd like. But thanks for being here. We hope to talk to you again very soon. Bye now.